Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina Woodruff from Core Connection. And this week we are going to get into relationships with adult children. And before we do that, Selina has this week's parenting moment.
Okay, so in our family, we have 5 girls and 2 boys. So the girls, naturally, we do girl things together, craft nights, go see a movie, those kind of things. I honestly always have guilt because I feel like it leaves the poor boys out. So I'm always encouraging my husband to find something to do with my son when we go do these things. But this weekend, us girls had something like an opportunity to go to a concert. And my youngest is only 8, and I was hesitating if I should let her go or not. But in the past, when we've had some of these girls' things and she hasn't been able to go because of her age, she whines and cries. And
she feels left out.
She feels left out. And so that became a factor when we were deciding if she was going to be able to go or not, because the next sister older, she's not the next sibling, but the sister older than her is old enough to go to some of these things. And so now I feel like, oh, she's the only one and she's left out. And like, so we went through that whole thing and we decided that the concert was family friendly and it would be something that would be okay for her to go to. And honestly, part of my motivating factor was I didn't want to listen to her whine and cry about how she was left out and didn't get to go to the girls thing. And it wasn't my only reason, but that was one of the reasons why I was allowing her to go too. And so it wasn't until Saturday night. So we, as a family, we were hanging out Saturday before the concert, all of us. So the boys included in that too. And I was, again, maybe that's the mom guilt. See how my parenting is motivated. But I wanted my son to have something to be able to do while we were at the concert, because my husband and him were going to be hanging out and not have a car and all that because we were going to be gone. And so I was like, okay, let's get him a Lego set. He'll be happy and he'll have that to do and he'll not feel left out either. And he'll have his thing and be excited. Well, guess what? The little daughter that I was so worried about, including her, she whined and cried because she didn't get a Lego set. And why didn't she get to be a part of that? And why did she wanted to go do what they were doing? And so I just had a moment that I was like, okay, parents out there, your kids are just going to whine and cry. So just do what's going to happen and don't do these things to avoid them whining and crying, and just be okay that she's going to whine and cry because she's not going to get what she wants.
Well, and a little clarification for our listeners. We were at a hotel, and so that's why we didn't have a car. We drove one car, and so the son and I were stuck at a hotel without a car. And so having something for him to do was kind of important to us.
Sure. And as an adult, I can look at that and say, oh yeah, that's totally reasonable. But as a younger kid, they don't see it that way. And I think that's also just a good lesson of, you know what, sometimes life is just unfair. And I think that's also just a good lesson for kids to learn. Like, it's not always, we try to make it equitable for everybody, but it's just not reasonable. And so I think that's also another good lesson for parents. And I also feel like, too, Selina, what you said about, you know, trying to make everybody happy. Yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah. New parenting. Someone is not going to be happy and be okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and because I totally get it. I mean, I have the same struggles with my son, because I let my kids just go wander the neighborhood and he gets left out a lot because, you know, and he feels left out a lot and he misses out on more of those things because, I mean, yeah, technically he's old enough to go hang out with his sister, but with his special needs, I'm not comfortable sending him to somebody's house who isn't capable of handling an allergic reaction or, you know, isn't familiar with a G-tube, right? So it is hard and it is a struggle, but you just can't make everybody happy. And you're going to waste a lot of life trying to please everybody and trying to make everybody happy. It's just not going to work.
They're still going to whine. Just Just
They are.
accept it. Don't make your parenting decisions off if they're going to whine and complain.
Yes, which, and I also totally get that, because it's easier if they just don't. It's easier to try to make them happy, but it doesn't always work. So, good parenting moment. Okay, so how to stay connected without overstepping. Relationships with adult children. This one can be tricky. I feel like I say that a lot about a lot of episodes, but we intentionally do some of these trickier topics because they're important. And this one is really interesting because the transition from my child is now an adult, they're 18, they've graduated high school, maybe they live with me, maybe they're going off to college. What's my role? And that shift, that can be genuinely difficult for parents to navigate. And having gone through it myself from the perspective of a teenager, I was pretty happy with the way my parents did it. I felt like it went really smooth, and I was very pleased with how it worked. I mean, there was some bumps when we added my husband to the family. But again, that's kind of part of the experience. So you guys have done this 3 times now. You've launched and now semi-launched 3 of your children. What has your experience been like for you guys?
We're like experts now. It's just easy and we have all the answers.
And we still do it all wrong. So yeah, like, and every kid's different. Like,
yes.
It's not like there's just one right way to do this and one wrong way. And I think one of the things I've learned of late is that not every kid at 18 or even 19 is ready to just be on their own and be totally independent in today's world. And so you just got to navigate that. And lots of things in parenting are tricky. And I think that's why you say that, Liz, is that we do go through these struggles and these challenges. Seems like we do it one time, we think we got it figured out, and then we got to do it the second time, we do it all wrong. And anyway, it's a process, and it can be a lot of fun. I think young adults are a lot of fun to work with. I think that it's exciting to see the goals and the desires and the growth and the choices and decisions and the paths that they choose. It can be a lot of fun. And I think just so much of it has a lot to do with our attitudes towards it. Then, if we make it just this drudgery of, it's so much work and it's miserable, then yeah, it's going to be so much work and misery. I say the same thing about parenting teens. People say how awful and terrible it is. And I say, what are you talking about? It's a lot of fun. There are hard times and it's challenging, but look at the opportunities in front of you. And
yeah.
It's fun to see your kids develop their own personalities and desires and pathways. And it's fun to have light bulb moments. It's fun to get a text message from a kid that says, "Hey, thanks for teaching me. I really appreciate that." That is so rewarding. And so what you think about it is really important.
Yeah. It reminds me of what Selina says a lot, is our thoughts are what determine our outcomes, or are what determine our experience. And so I was talking to a mom who was getting ready to send her oldest off to college. And she was going to college in the same state, but still she was going to be living on campus and no longer living primarily at home. And I'm like, "Oh, well, how are you feeling about this?" And she's like, "I'm actually pretty okay with it." And, she felt comfortable, and maybe it would have been, and she's like, "Maybe I'll feel differently when she's actually gone. But right now I'm feeling good about it." And, because the daughter was still going to be able to come home on long weekends or holidays, right? And so it seemed to be, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, right? But from my perspective, it seemed like she more had your perspective on it of, this is exciting. My daughter's going off into the world and to be who she wants to be. And it sounds like she had a good enough relationship with her daughter that she was still going to be involved in her life and still be connected to her. And I think that helps a lot.
Well, make no mistake about it. See, there's space in there for it to be hard and difficult and find the joy in it. Because I'll tell you, when we dropped our first and oldest daughter off at college, that was awful. Nobody warned us about that. I hated it. I think Selina felt the same way. we're dropping them off, 1,000, for us, it was about 1,000 miles away from home, and in this strange and foreign place. And are they going to be okay? I'm used to making sure that all my kids are, in the house at night before the doors are locked, and I know everything about everything they're doing. And now all of a sudden we've got this change, and our oldest was barely 18 when they went to college, but it was just such a hard struggle for us. Yet we were super excited for her to experience this part of life. And she was well prepared, very independent and capable. And I wasn't really worried about that piece of it, but it is often hard, and we can be okay with it and be excited for the future of that individual.
It's one of those like best, worst days of your life. Yeah. Like, you really want it and it's a great thing, but it's also really hard and struggles for us personally.
Well, and I think too, sometimes when we have those hard parenting moments, we think, oh, I can't wait till they're off to college and independent. The grass is always greener. It always seems greener on the other side. And it's usually not. But again, I think it's okay to feel both, right? I think it's perfectly reasonable and expected to feel both, to feel this excitement of my kid is going to go off and do great things in the world, but my kid is going off into the world, and holy crap, that's terrifying. Both feelings are 100% acceptable. So how do we do this? How do we shift from this authority figure that we've been for the last 18 years into this mentor partner in the relationship? And one of the things that I think is important to take into account, or that can be tricky, is just because your kid is off to college doesn't mean they're necessarily still completely independent, right? Especially financially. And that can create some difficulty of, hey, I'm paying for this college, or I'm helping you pay for it, or I'm providing you some financial assistance, and you have certain expectations for that. So that can also be really tricky to navigate. And that's going to look different for every single parent-child dynamic, right? But it's something to consider and to think about, okay, what are my expectations? What are the boundaries? And maybe just try having that conversation ahead of time, rather than just sending them off to college and you're going to pay for things and then say, hey, why aren't you doing this? Right? Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it does. And you kind of have two different parts in here. So how do we do it was kind of your first part. Like, how do we make that transition from being the parent and kind of the authority figure in their lives to this partner / mentor? And what I'm going to say is that hopefully that particular piece has been a gradual change starting in their teenage years, as you kind of start to let go of the reins and hand them over a little bit and work on creating that partnership. Now, if you haven't and you've controlled everything in their lives, well, that's okay too. We can work through that. But the idea is that we start when they're capable and ready, giving them more and more freedoms to make decisions that we can coach them through or mentor them through, so that they're already kind of used to being a little bit more independent and self-sustaining. And then I think when it comes to like setting the expectations, especially if you're financially providing for them, if they're paying for everything themselves, then, I guess you could just say, well, sayonara, good luck, but I'm here for you, whatever you need.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you're paying for college, you certainly need to sit down together and lay out the expectations, whatever those look like. And it might, for your family, it might be, okay, I'll pay for your tuition, but you've got to pay for room and board and your entertainment. So you're going to have to get a job. Maybe some families are like, hey, I'm going to pay for your tuition, your housing, and I'm going to give you an allowance of, X number of dollars per month, and you've got to stay within that budget. And if you want it beyond that, you've got to work. Or hey, here's the credit card, and, pay for whatever you need, and good luck. There's different ways of approaching that, however it is for you, whatever you think is going to be best for your child. But it is something that conversation has to happen long before, we pack up the car and head off to the dorms, and helping them understand the expectation. And maybe the expectation in your house is, hey, I'm happy to pay for tuition as long as you're getting at least a C in all of your classes. Or, I'm happy to pay for tuition as long as you meet these expectations and you share your grades with me, whatever it looks like. I'm not endorsing one way or the other because every child has a different need and every family structure is different. But the expectation has to be set long before the bags are packed, and not on our way to college. But that conversation happens, as we are looking at schools and we're preparing for college, if college is the thing. Or, maybe we're looking at paying for a trade school or some other sort of training. All of those expectations need to be in place, and then we follow through with them. What we don't want to end up doing, if we can avoid it, is adding expectations partway through. Sometimes that's necessary, and I would support it if that's necessary. And like Selina and I often say in our parenting, this is subject to change. Because we change rules and change our expectations sometimes based on the needs of the individual. And so there could be a caveat with that. Hey, this is mom and dad's typical, this is currently where the expectations are, but it's subject to change. But we want to be really cautious with those changes and make sure that we're making them for the right reason and that it's for the benefit of the child and not because we're annoyed because they're being independent and being on their own.
Yeah, and that's another pretty good point, because you do have to let them still be an adult, and you have to own that they're gonna make mistakes. Maybe they do fail a class, and it's okay to say, well, help me understand what happened here. And maybe they just said, I tried and tried, it just didn't work out, I'm just gonna have to retake this class. And maybe for you, they put forth their best effort and that's good enough. But if they just said, well, I don't know, I just got tired and kept sleeping in and didn't go to class, well, that's not really gonna work for me. Right? And again, everything is going to be different. But it's also okay to revisit boundaries and say, hey, I'm giving you X amount to do this every month and you're spending it in 2 weeks. What's going on here? We need to rediscuss this, or we need to discuss what's going on. That's okay too. I think it is okay to have a reevaluation of the boundaries. That's a good thing to do.
Yeah, and that's why I said at the beginning, like, this isn't an endorsement of one way or the other. Some might have to say, hey, we have a budget of XYZ for you to spend on food, and we expect you to stay within that budget. We'll transfer money in your account, or you have a credit card, or whatever that looks like. And then that conversation, and sometimes they're going to have it with you, sometimes they're not, but just being able to be aware of what's happening and what you're choosing, making sure the expectations are set and understood, and then following through with those expectations when you need to. That's probably the harder part of it.
Yeah, I agree. And, I feel like we're talking specifically about college, but we also have this, I feel like almost maybe increasing branch of children or of teenagers who they're not interested in going to college and they want to go straight into the workforce. Or maybe they aren't able to get into college, or maybe it's just not financially feasible. That can be another tricky thing to navigate because, it's hard in our current economic situation to live on your own. It's almost not doable for somebody who just got out of high school. Because if you just got out of high school, you're not going to get more than, maybe a minimum wage job, or you're going to struggle financially. And so, again, I think it's about setting the boundaries and having the expectations, and whatever that looks like for your family. Like, okay, yes, you can continue to live here rent-free, but maybe we expect you to pitch in with this, or we expect you to do this, right? And so, again, there's no one right way to do it, but I do think that it is important to set boundaries and expectations so that your adult child is still learning responsibilities and you feel like you're not being taken advantage of as a parent.
Yeah, I don't think you're doing anybody any service by just allowing a kid to live in your basement, play video games, and do nothing else with their lives. If we're 18, we should be working on goals, and we should be working, well, we should always be working on goals, but we should be working on goals if you're going to live in our house. And you've got to figure out what those boundaries look like, and what does the future look like? What am I working towards? What do I want to achieve and accomplish? As we go through that process, we do continue to teach them independence and capacity to care for themselves and those types of things. But it's got to be a conversation that happens and happens regularly. And, you are going to make mistakes along the way. There's going to be struggles and difficulties to overcome. It can be a very difficult place for a lot, and it could be a source of tension and contention in homes as children kind of graduate high school and then figure out what they're going to do. I don't know. I guess I have a hard time with it. It's a struggle for me personally with my kids, and setting aside those boundaries and understanding the complexity and the challenges financially. It's not easy to be on your own. It never has been. It never will be. Currently, housing prices in most cities and states across America are pretty challenging for young folks just out of high school. And so if you're not going to go to college, then that's fine. I don't believe college is for everybody. I think that I might get some hate for this, but I think we push kids to college too often when they don't need to. And we allow kids to get degrees that are useless and aren't beneficial. And so that's why this conversation about where do you want to go in life becomes really important. What do you want to achieve? Well, I want to go to school and get a degree in, mud pies. Well, mud pies aren't going to make any money. Right. And I know I'm being facetious with that, but there are a lot of degrees that are not worth earning. And then we got to look at the cost of the school that you want to go to as well. If we're going to go to a school that is going to cost us maybe, $180,000 for a 4-year program, and then we can expect that career to produce, $50,000 or $60,000 a year, we're probably going the wrong direction with things.
And the reality is that's a very real struggle for most colleges, right? I mean, just to get a bachelor's degree in anything, oftentimes you're going to go into debt, and then your initial income isn't going to be like, it can be difficult to cover the cost or recover that cost and going into debt. That's a very real struggle. I think there's a lot of value in trade schools. Another thing that I think is highly valuable is if they're going to a local college, I think, and again, if this works for your family, I'm not saying this is going to work for all families and all dynamics, but if your kid is living with you and going to college, I think that's fantastic. I think that's a very economically smart way to do things if it's going to work, right? And so there's lots of different ways to launch a kid, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan of trade schools myself, or, I met a kid recently that is really looking at wanting to start his own plumbing business in the future. So he's going to go work for a plumber. Well, that's wonderful. That's great. You don't need to go to college for that. And you can make some great money. It's going to take a little time, but you can make some great money. It's a very worthy cause and a great career. And so I think that the key is just helping them discover what direction they want to go in life. What do they want to do? What do they want to accomplish? And some kids aren't going to know. That's okay too. Don't stress too much. And so sometimes it's okay to just go to the local community college and start taking general ed classes because I'm not sure what I want to do. And sometimes we can take classes that interest us in different directions to see what is going to be valuable and what's not going to be valuable. But I think really the goal here that we're discussing is having a direction, having some goals set, and working towards those instead of just, existing in your bedroom at home and playing video games or hanging out with friends, but doing something that is contributing to your success and taking your life in the direction you want to go.
I also want to acknowledge that there are kids who sometimes have additional struggles, maybe whether it's cognitive struggles or mental health struggles that prevent them from functioning in the adult world. And I want to acknowledge that that's going to be maybe completely separate. So if you've got a kid who, is maybe 19 or 20 and you feel like you're failing as a parent because you haven't launched your kid, well, where's your kid at emotionally and mentally? Do they have severe crippling anxiety that they're still working through? It's different. So don't beat yourself up because you have this expectation of where you think your kid should be and they're not. Don't put that on yourself. Does that make sense?
Well, and that's what I was going to say. If someone is struggling with their adult child and they're having a hard time having a relationship, I would have you question what story you have for them. So if you have a story of they should be doing this or this or this or this, I would start there. I would start with the story that you have for them and what you think the expectations are. And looking at those can help you maybe make an adjustment in being excited or happy or supporting them in the things that they want to be doing and not what you think they should be doing.
I think that's a super important part of this conversation, Selina, to bring up is making sure that we're supporting them in their desires and not what we think is best for them. You might think your kid should be a doctor and they're like, I can't stand the idea of being a doctor. I don't want to be a doctor, or whatever the topic is. Right.
Yeah.
But supporting them in their goals. And there's certainly struggles that crop up for some where there's maybe a cognitive or a mental health struggle that you talked about, Liz. And of course, we got to deal with those as they come. But I think we're just talking mostly in generalities here that, we just don't want them doing nothing. That is not good for them. It's not good for us. It's going to create tension in the home. But I love what Selina said in supporting them for their goals, their desires, helping them discover those and helping them find the resources to discover it. It's going to be important.
And I think most kids want to do something. I think it's pretty rare that you find a 17, 18-year-old senior in high school who's saying, I just want to sit in my parents' basement and play video games, or I just want to sit and draw all day and not do anything productive with my life. That doesn't fit with most kids, right? And so again, I think it's all about knowing your kid well enough, having enough of a connection to know what excites them, what are their goals, what do they want to do with life, and what can I do to support you to reach that goal. And I think also accepting they might change their mind. And maybe that's frustrating to you because maybe they're halfway into a career and they're like, this isn't going to work for me. I don't want this at all. I need to do something different. And now they're going to have to spend an extra 6 months to a year in college. Maybe that feels frustrating as parents, but you have to remember. And again, I think that goes with what Selina was saying of maybe you have a story of how their life should go, but it's not your story. It's their story. And as parents, we've got to let them live their story. And we've got to give them room to make mistakes, even as an adult. It's part of the growing process. And I think it's important to give them space to do that.
Yeah, well, and you're not going to live your kid's life. So dictating what they should do in college isn't the greatest idea. And, it's not uncommon to switch directions in college, sometimes multiple times. It's not uncommon to switch. Sometimes people complete a college degree and start a career and realize, whoa, this was a mistake. What have I done here? And so our role as parents is to support, and we want to be there to mentor and to guide and direct, but we don't dictate what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. I think we can just apply that to a lot of situations that our children, as they become adults, are going to choose. We haven't even talked about marriage and them getting married and who they marry or who they date or what they decide to do with their love life, right? That's going to also have all of these things applied to it. What do we expect from them? Where is our role in this? We can't control what they're doing and who they're hanging out with and who they're associating with or who they're marrying. I'm sorry if this is news to someone, but we don't control that. And so we can always just step back and what's my role? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up for this? Who do I want to be for my kid in their life? I want to be that mentor, to be there to guide them, to not lecture and tell them what to do, but to be there for them to bounce things off of us or work it through or ask them the questions that can help them to find and discover that for themselves, what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've always appreciated the role my parents have played in my adult life because, they've always wanted to be involved in my life. They've always respected my adult boundaries. And as a result, I've wanted them in my life too. I want them. I want to talk to them. I want them to be involved. I want them to come see their grandkids. I still call them for advice and for help, right? On things. And, I'm imagining that that's what most parents want. That's your goal as a parent, is to want your child to want you in their life. And so think about, how can I achieve that? And so I think one of the things that we can do is when we give them space and we give them, time to be independent, to be an adult, to live on their own and to do adult things, and we give them the space, they're more likely to come back, to circle back and say, hey, man, I just miss you guys. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever. Can I come home this weekend? And you're going to be like, yeah, absolutely. So, how can you cultivate that type of a relationship with your kid as opposed to, well, why haven't you called me this week? There's a difference there. And so trying to cultivate the relationship that you want.
Yeah. So I think just always maybe checking in with yourself of like, how am I showing up? Who am I? Maybe a question you could say is, what can I do for you? Because I feel like the latter of what you're saying of like, oh, how come you didn't call me, and using guilt trips and that kind of stuff, that to me becomes real selfish and really all about you. and you're making them and their decisions and how they're living their life, you're making that about you. That is not going to cultivate connection. So asking yourself, what can I do for them, and not making it about yourself is what's going to cultivate that connection with someone else.
Yeah, I love the idea of the connection, creating the connection. That's how we do this, creating and maintaining connections with them and respecting their boundaries too, because they're adults now and they need their own autonomy. They need their space. They need to be able to do what they want to do. And yeah, we haven't talked about marriage relationships and those kinds of things, but that's likely going to be a part of their lives. And so we've got to be able to find that way to connect and to continue the relationship. So much of that happens through the service that Selina's talking about.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about kind of this launching phase, which is a really important phase. There is more with this topic that we want to get to, and we're running out of time. So we are going to circle back to this topic. But in the meantime, we hope that this has been helpful for maybe parents who are getting ready or have launched and maybe feel like it didn't go so well, right? And so there's room for improvement, and there's always room to change. So, final thoughts on launching children.
Connect with them. Love them. Support them in their goals and their desires. Communicate with them. Set healthy boundaries and work within those boundaries to help support them through that process. Allow them to be independent, and don't try and control their lives. Mm-hmm. You don't live their life. You don't have to live through their experiences. They're going to have a different view of things than you are. I mean, you got to be there and support and love them and guide and mentor them through the process of getting out of the house and developing careers and going to school or whatever they choose to do.
Yeah, I think instead of being scared or worried or sad about this time, just use this as an opportunity. It doesn't have to weaken the relationship. It can actually build and make that bond even stronger and that connection even stronger. So use that and have your thoughts of like, what an exciting time that I get this opportunity to learn and grow in a different way with my child and get to know them in a different way as they become an adult, and use that to strengthen your connection. It doesn't have to make it weaker. And just realize that the value of you in your child's life is just as important, and it's always going to be important throughout their life.
Your role may change, but your value in your child's life never does. So, keep that in mind. If we allow, there can always be room in a child's life for their parents. I certainly have room in my life for my parents in my 30s, and I love it. So it is possible. Give yourself grace. You're going to make mistakes. It's fine. We'll figure it out. So next week, we are going to get into adding to the family, and we will see you all then. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.